truth you find is the key now. Reach your fear and you will all be free now. Community, it's time to get better. You can't avoid it, we're all in this together. Head high, fill your heart with love and light now. Come together and it will be alright now. Come together, you can't run forever. Come together, it's now, oh, it's never. Community, kids are dying in the streets now. Change your mind, unity is all we need now. Community, kids are dying in the streets now. Change your mind, unity is all we need now. Change your mind, unity is all we need now. Change your mind, unity is all we need.
Chris Sanders with Community All Unite TV every Thursday from 8 to 8:30 on channels 1097 and 190. We are in the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center with the great Ricardo Khan, artistic director, founder of the Crossroads Theater, and so many other things. I want him to please tell me your historic story, because I know what type of legend I'm sitting with, and people might not say it often, but you are a pioneer. You have brought the arts to a community, Black arts to a community that probably wouldn't have had it if it wasn't for you. And I just wanted you to tell your story of your successes and some of your pitfalls, so these young people that are aspiring to bring in visions and artistic light to some things that haven't been shown like you have, can follow in your footsteps.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, and you're very kind, Chris, and it's good to see you. And you also want to mention that we're friends and have been knowing each other for quite some time now.
Right.
But you know, when I came out of Rutgers and undergraduate, I did a lot of theater, but my major was psychology.
Okay.
And it was psychology because I was scared to major in the area I really wanted to, and I wanted to back up just in case. But then by the time I got to grad school, that time it was like, no, I know what I want to do. I know what I have to do. And so I went to Mason Gross School of the Arts. So coming out after, 8 years of training, my friend Lee Richardson and I, who came out of Mason Gross together, we did what we were supposed to do. You start as actors going out to New York, auditioning wherever you can, trying to get an agent. And the thing that you find is that the opportunities don't always add up to your preparedness. And the fact that we had spent so much time and money training, and then you get out there and people say, well, you know, are you interested in this role as a pimp, you know, or a drug dealer, or, you know, somebody who beats his wife, and you're thinking, first of all, where do they come up with this? And that's who we are as a people. Then I started thinking about my parents. I started thinking about how the sacrifices they made so that I could be here. And I'm thinking to myself, all of the training that I went through, being prepared and getting out there, and that's how they look at you. And I thought, no, there's got to be another way. So Crossroads was not something we set up to make a big splash. It was not about, let's change the world. Not in that way. We were individuals who simply wanted to work. We were artists who wanted to achieve within an environment that respects us, that's positive, that's creative, and takes advantage of everything we wanted to do. So when you speak about young people, I just go back to that time and realizing that if they don't want you the way you are, find your own way. And that's what we did.
Sure. So now, when you first said that the fear, first you went for psychology. Actually, my son is starting psychology in Hawaii. That's where I was coming from.
Okay.
Chaminade University is going.
All right.
But now you said that you only went into psychology because you were fearful for what you really wanted to do?
No. I was fearful of what my parents would say
Yeah.
if I said, I want to go into theater, right? In reality, they eventually came along, but they wanted to make sure that I had, if that was my love, that I had a backup, that I had some other, and actually it turned out really well because I use psychology in everything that I do, in terms of directing. You know, I didn't learn hypnosis. I could try. Tell people, you know, I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV.
Right.
Theater was just something that was in me because of my parents, especially my mother, who grew up in Philadelphia. And you have to realize that Philadelphia at that time was the mecca, the center of black music, especially black jazz and musicians who would really, you know, cut their teeth there. Camden, New Jersey, which is where we grew up mainly, was where RCA was, RCA Victor, and all of the people coming through there to perform, to record. When I was not even born, my mother told me that she and my dad would take me out in D.C. to the Potomac River, where they would play concerts, philharmonics, and that sort of thing. And that, she says that's where I get my love for music. And maybe she's right. I just know that I've always had that love for music, for art. When I got into high school, and it was during the Vietnam War, and of course the Civil Rights Movement, and the women's movement, all these things were happening at the same time. And I guess theater was a way for me to respond. But I responded simply by jumping into the music of it. It was almost like theater protected me from dealing with all this other madness. And then when I went away to school and got into New Brunswick and at Rutgers, that's when I started to realize and connect with other black and brown people and white brothers and sisters who were allies, and thought, wow, there's a gift here, there's an opportunity here. And if I could marry the two, I could make a difference.
Right.
And so that's kind of what happened.
Did you start out by just doing plays out in the park, or was it something that
When I started out,
yeah,
I went to a predominantly white school in Philadelphia when I was a kid. It was a Quaker school. But I lived in Camden in a predominantly black neighborhood. So I guess you could say that I spent my days in one world and my nights in another. I remember getting cast in the Gilbert and Sullivan operetta called The Mikado. And they did a Gilbert and Sullivan every year. If you imagine the theater there, and then on each side you have these two alcoves. They put me on an alcove over there because they wouldn't dare put somebody of my color on the stage. And that happened year after year, and I guess it bothered me more when I look back on it than when I was in it, because all I wanted to do was be a part of something. But when I would come home, I remember picking up a book, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, and pretending that I was Sidney Poitier in the movie, and I would be in my room pretending and doing all of his lines and trying to be Sidney Poitier and in all of his rage and righteousness. And I guess that was my way of coping with this desire. So it was that in my room before it was in the streets. Later, I did do street theater. I rallied my siblings together to do theater. For every Christmas time, we would do a show for our parents and grandparents. In the summertime, I would try to get the folks in the block, to do things. I think that at that time it was about trying to emulate not just people like Sidney Poitier and Lorraine Hansberry, but Harry Belafonte and his music, and Miriam Makeba and that sort of thing. All of these to eventually get me to the point where I discovered this opportunity in New Brunswick that could start a black theater. We weren't allowed to say black, by the way. It was ethnic. The Ethnic Theater Project.
Who stopped you?
Well, it was a government thing. The money that allowed us to start it was from the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act.
Oh, okay.
CETA. And CETA started a lot of organizations back then by basically taking the unemployed, which was primarily me and just about everybody else in the theater, and giving them jobs for a year. A lot of it was about retraining, but it was mainly about getting people off of the unemployment rolls and ready to take on something in a year. And we did. We did. And that's how Crossroads started. We were not a 501c3 organization, so we had to find one. And that's when we went to the George Street Playhouse. Eric Krebs. I said, Eric, can you do? He said, yeah, of course, of course. Back in those days, Chris, a lot of people would say, we would love to do a black play, but there's no audience out there. So what CETA did was give us an opportunity to say, let us show you. And we did. So that's what got me to Crossroads.
So then after you came up with the title Crossroads, the space, how did you find the space? How'd you find Crossroads?
Well, actually, it was interesting. We were looking around. We were looking on Church Street. I love Church Street because it was closer to the mainstream. We were trying to work that. There were other places as well. Roy Epps, president of the Civic League in New Brunswick, he helped a lot too. Then I was in a play up in Springfield, Massachusetts, Raisin in the Sun.
Okay.
And we were still trying to find a space. So Lee calls me one day and he says, Rick, I think I got the perfect space. I said, where is it? He said, it's all the way down on Memorial Parkway. I said, what? It's so far away from the mainstream. He said, no, it's perfect because first of all, the ceilings are high. It used to be a factory. It has a funk to it. And the landlords are wonderful people. So I came down and checked it out. And sure enough, he was right. You don't have to be in the mainstream to be able to do your own thing. And because we weren't in the mainstream, what happened was we had to find our own way. There was a big post, if you remember, in the middle of the stage. And this was a big Y-beam. It came up and then it went out. And it did that because it was formerly a sewing factory, so it had to hold all of this equipment. The walls were brick. The windows, which were beautiful, because there was a river on one side and New Brunswick on the other, except for the fact that all the windows were frosted over. Why? Because the owners of the sweatshop did not want the workers there to be distracted and look out the window. Is that crazy?
Right. So
it seemed a perfect place for us because there was that history, there was that funk, and there was that post. And people would ask about that post all the time. And designers, of course. Set designers would say, what am I going to do with this post in the middle? But they always found a way. And when I tell people, when I look back on those days, I say that post, it wasn't just there because of a sewing factory, it was there for us. That post stood up, reached its arms out in a Y, and it said, find your way around me.
Right.
Find your way around me. And we did. We did.
So when you first, was there like a business plan that you laid out? Because I mean, when you were trying to get a 501c3, sometimes you have to have a whole description of each one of you as the organization and board members and all these.
Yes, but it's easier than you think. It's not. I want to make it clear that most of the time when you got to go through hurdles, jump hurdles, it's not as deep as you think it is. Once you get into it, you'll see it's okay. We did not have a 501c3, but we had the money coming from CETA and we had George C. Playhouse.
Yes.
So for those first 2 years of Crossroads, we were under their umbrella. We had the money we needed.
Right.
The problem was, for me, identity. I wanted to be on our own. That's number one. The other is that as long as you were a government organization funding you every year, it also stipulated that you cannot hire people you know already. So that meant that I couldn't build a staff. I would have to let them go after every year, and I didn't want to do that. By the end of our first year, I realized just how much opportunity was there. In the beginning, as I said, it was about us doing our work and reaching out to other people like us who also wanted to do their work in a certain way, in a professional way, and be paid. And it was great. So we did shows in that first year and never charged any money.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we had everything, and it was great. You know, it was really wonderful. I think when we did start to charge, which was in the second year, people respected us even more. You know, almost like, hey, we're legitimate now because we could charge money. But in reality, it was because by the end of the first year, I wanted us to be out on our own by the end of the second year. So year 2 was about trying to put in place all those things you're talking about. Setting up the 501c3, which was about going to my brother Ronnie Wright, attorney, who said, I'll do this for you pro bono. And he set up the incorporation. He sent me downstairs. He was on Baird Street. Sent me downstairs to another person, Joe Spack, said he's an accountant. I want you to go down there and have him set up your books and show you how to do that. And that's kind of how we started. And then came going towards our end of our second year and needing to really develop a board. And I also knew that we were about to go out on our own. So that's one of the reasons why we started to charge, not because we needed the money, but because we needed the people to get in the habit of giving. Foundation people started to come to see Crossroads. George C. Playhouse sent their followers and supporters. And by the end of the second year, Roy Epps got a group of people together on the Crossroads stage who were made up of people from education, from J&J, from a bunch of different places, and the city, and said, look, you know, would you guys be interested in being a board of Crossroads? And a lot of them did. Cheryl Wall, who we just lost last year, was our first board president. Penelope Latimer, who was our second board president, was in that group as well. There were a number of people, but if you put the building blocks together, you eventually end up in a good place because you can count on those blocks and you can count on those people. And by the time we went out on our own, it was not just about saying, okay, let's go out there. People already knew us. So funders were saying, how can we help you? And I guess that's kind of how it started. But one person always said, you'll be all right as long as your work stays good. Make sure your work is good and that your message is relevant and that you stay connected to your community. And that's what we did.
So were you writing a lot of stuff, or were you doing others? No?
No, I was, I had an MFA, a double MFA in acting and directing. So it took me 4 years as opposed to normally 3. Lee had an MFA in acting. So when we came into it, I was the one who had the experience and more of a desire for directing. He had more of a desire for acting. And that kind of started to switch a little bit along the way. But yeah, but those are the skills we came into it with, not writing.
Right. So when did you start getting the big name stars like coming?
Well,
and who was the first one?
Oh man, when you say big name stars, you know, there were people there who were not stars back then. That's where they started, a lot of them. But you had Don Evans, the playwright, who's done a lot of pieces, and he would do premiere all his pieces at Crossroads, and we're really happy about that. He's from Trenton, but he was a very well-known playwright at the time. At the point where we started to do more and more new work, we came across George C. Wolfe.
Right.
And George C. Wolfe started with the Colored Museum at Crossroads, and then that's when people started to really get to know us and who we are. But we had a lot of stars along the way. Certainly people like Denise Nicholas, people we remember from Room 222 way back in the day, and In the Heat of the Night with Carol O'Connor on TV. She did her first, the first play she ever wrote was at Crossroads. We did Black Eagles and about the Tuskegee Airmen, and I remember the number of people coming. Martin Scorsese came to that play. You know, he stopped off at the Frog and the Peach asking people, excuse me, but where is Crossroads? Because he was trying to get there. People like Charles Nelson Riley came to see Avery Brooks do Paul Robeson and wanted to take it into New York after that. There were just a number of people who were stars, but you wouldn't know them back then necessarily. Anna Devere Smith, Denitra Vance, who was the first Black female on Saturday Night Live. She was there back then. It went on and on. Denise Nicholas wrote her first play I told you about, Buses. Well, that was about Rosa Parks, and Rosa Parks came and stayed with us for the weekend in New Brunswick. Just the number of people who came through because of their work, and that's what was important. But then we also started to do our benefits, fundraisers, and that's with people like Ray Charles and Smokey Robinson and Wynton Marsalis and Dionne Warwick. Some really pretty great people along the way.
One person or people, a couple that come to mind, of course, is Ruby Dee and Ozzy.
They came. So once we came over to the new theater, then we started to get some funding specifically to get people like Ruby Dee and folks to be able to make Crossroads their home.
Yes.
And ask them, well, what is it that you've always wanted to do that you could do anywhere, but you want to do it here? And that program brought in Ruby Dee and Antizaki Shange, who wrote for Color Girls, and it brought in Ossie Davis and Hal Scott and Avery Brooks and Bongani and Gema from South Africa, who wrote Serafina. Who else? Anna Devere Smith. It just a number of people who would make Crossroads their home and work on projects for a number of years. And once we were in there, I felt we were in the groove, and people would ask me, well, how would I design our shows, our seasons. And I said, well, I never designed a season of plays. I designed a season of people. And when their play is ready, we do it.
Right. So how do you stay clear of the politics and activism? I mean, the plays itself, right? I guess were a form of activism, bringing that.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, when Mandela was in prison, of course he was in prison for a long time, but there was a point where I just said, and I made an announcement to the audience, we're going to do an anti-apartheid show every year.
Yes.
Until apartheid is done. And that's what we did every year.
Yeah.
One time, John Heldridge from J&J hosted a VIP night for Crossroads, at one of our shows. And at that time, J&J had not divested from South Africa.
Right.
They had other plans. And they were very committed, but they just wanted to do it a different way. So they were never divested, and stockholders would always hold their meetings, but outside would be picket signs and that sort of thing. So I wondered, now you have this VIP event hosted by John Heldridge of J&J, but they're doing it at a show that was an anti-apartheid show. So how do you square with all of that? And I asked him, and he said, for you guys, it's about the work. Your work is good. Your work is good, and that's what matters. So, yeah, we did a lot of shows that were political, that were about South Africa, but also about the U.S. Shoot, Chris, if you're black, everything's political.
Yeah. Did you have to get some political backing, or you just stayed?
Political backing?
Right.
No, we never officially backed any candidate or any political party.
Nobody came and asked you to?
They wouldn't, because if you're a 501c3 organization, you're not allowed to do that.
Right.
But there were times when people would say, look, can I host a rally here? Could I do that or do that? And they would rent the space. But that's really about it.
Right.
That's really about it.
Did you ever do something about Barack Obama?
Well, I did a play called Fly, and it was about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Right.
And I did that after. Its predecessor was Black Eagles, right?
Yeah.
By the way, that's when Colin Powell came to see it.
Okay.
And also George Bush came to see it. We were doing it at the Ford's Theater, but then I did Fly years and years later, and it was a commission for Lincoln Center, specifically Lincoln Center Education, and it was a nice piece. And it was about 55 minutes long because that's all they wanted it to be. But then people would say, you should make it a full length because then everybody could see it. It'd be great. And so my writing partner, Trey Ellis, he and I said, let's do it. So we expanded it. It happened that year we expanded it. And we first did a workshop production up in Martha's Vineyard because I wanted to make sure we didn't mess it up before we brought it to Crossroads. But it happened that around that time, Obama was running and then became president. I went to his inauguration, and I saw Tuskegee Airmen there as his special guests. And they had the blankets on because it was a cold day. And they had their hats on and their jackets. Tuskegee Airmen and women, and they were just so proud there. And immediately I thought, they're the reason he's there. The Tuskegee Airmen in the 40s kicked off so much of the civil rights movement. Before Rosa Parks, before Emmett Till, before all of this, there were these black men and black women risking their lives for a country that basically didn't care for them the way they should, didn't respect them. And now here we are at an inauguration of the first black president.
Yeah.
I said, no, they got to be here.
Yeah.
So with Fly is the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, but it starts off with one of them in present day at the inauguration.
Sure.
Just couldn't believe it. You just can't believe it. And then that takes him back and tells the story. And that's the so the beginning and the end of the piece is Obama.
Right. There was a play I remember I saw at Crossroads about Muhammad Ali, I think it was.
Yeah, Ali. It was called Ali.
Ali. Yes, and then there was, I mean, and at that time, of course, you were there when there was Malcolm and there was Martin and Muhammad Ali, and all these things were happening at one time. Take me through that experience and what you were feeling at the time, because I don't know what, if I was at that time, who I would be, who I would side with. Malcolm X, more than likely it would be Malcolm X.
Well, I was a kid, so I didn't really, Malcolm and Martin were more of my parents' generation. So it's what we learned from them.
Right.
And then, of course, with the television, we were able to see the speeches and that sort of thing. And then we had a dentist in Camden, black dentist, and every time he'd do our teeth, he'd had Malcolm on, playing the record, right? And then we talk about him. I think that at that time, Chris, it was confusing for a kid thinking that the whole purpose here was to try to be the best you can be in order to be accepted in America. And that's how we were raised, to be the best we could be. And we knew that we had to be twice as good as our white counterparts to get the same recognition and respect. But it's what it was, and that's what you did. Years later, I started to regret my choice for Martin over Malcolm, only because I wasn't so sure America was ready to accept us as equals and level the playing field so that we can move forward. I thought that we had a good chance during Reconstruction, which was the years right after the Civil War and Emancipation. And at that particular time, white people weren't prepared, for the most part, to accept black people as their equals, because black people prior to that, they considered their property. And white liberals who fought against slavery would always, in my mind, see blacks as a charity of theirs, even though it was from a good heart. That still was not an even playing field. Malcolm, on the other hand, was saying, get with it, folks. It's never going to be a level playing field unless you create the field yourself. Why are you spending so much time on their playing field? And I remember a time when Martin, there's a picture, it's a famous picture with Martin and Andrew Young, and they're at an airport. It's a black and white, and Martin is nervous, and Andrew Young is leaning into him, listening. And what that picture was all about was a moment where Andy Young says, Martin, why are you so worried? What are you worried about? And he said, man, I'm worried that we spent all this time trying to get through the doors into a house that is now on fire. And I'll never forget that. I think the Crossroads was our way of reconciling with all of those leaders and all those things that we had to deal with as we were growing up, and our parents did too. To get to the point where we knew we were going to make mistakes going forward. We knew we were going to take risks. We knew we were going to succeed in many ways. but we were going to do it on our own terms. That's what Crossroads was.
Right.
And that's part of what I got from Malcolm's teachings, and from W.B. Du Bois, and from a lot of folks like that who were just saying, just do it yourself.
Yeah.
There was a time when we were doing a lot of South African work, and in fact, I stayed, after I left Crossroads, the first time I stayed in South Africa a bit. And I remember Mongani Ngema, who wrote and directed Serafina, we were out to lunch once, and he asked me, he said, Rick, what does it feel like to live in a country that's not your own? And that struck me for a moment, because I realized, no, it's not my own. It's not. But there are communities where I feel me. There are theaters like Crossroads where I feel me.
Yeah.
There are stores, restaurants where I feel me. Performing centers. It's up to us, Chris, to make it our country, our home, our country. It's up to us.
Yeah.
But the days of saying, please welcome me, please accept me, those are over.
Yeah, I think a lot of other cultures are not asking for a hand. You know, it's not a handout, but asking for anything. Just taking their property, building communities, these whole cities inside of different states that are all of them.
And we got to learn. Yeah, we're getting there too.
Yeah,
we're getting there too. But you're right. I mean, it's my father's from Trinidad, and Trinidad's made up of about 30%. I'd say about 35% of African descent, 35% of East Indian descent, and the rest Spanish, European, Chinese, and a mix of everybody, and Amerindian. And when I left Crossroads in '99, I wanted to live in Trinidad because I had just gotten tired of the language of race and the fact that every time a black play is done, it's always about how looking Macedon is wrong, that sort of thing. And I always tried to avoid that and instead look at us not as victims, survivors, but not victims. So the question is, well, okay, who are we then? If we don't base it on our history, what do we base it on?
Right.
So I went to Trinidad because I wanted to learn a different way, a different perspective on that. And what I found there, as well as in South Africa, is that we as people, and Malcolm learned this when he went to Mecca, we're children of God. We are citizens of the world. We're a people created based on roots that span the globe, right?
Yes.
If that's the case, we are infinitely more powerful and capable than we think we are if we have all this time prior based our sense of who we are on the block we grew up on.
Right. Or
a country that has such a history and continuing legacy of hatred and racism and violence. If that's all we focus on, that's who we are a part of.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And a lot of folks, black folks growing up, they say, well, I'm not African. Right?
Yeah.
People say that today. I'm not this, I'm not that. Yes, you are. At some point, yes, you are.
Yeah.
But embrace it. Not just Africa, but the Caribbean, Bahia in Brazil, and South Asia, and the islands, the Pacific Islands, and the world. We have roots there. And as people who are like we are sitting right here, sitting on land that is really the Lenape land. We as Black people also have roots in the Native American history and Native American culture. We just have to open up and see that.
Yeah.
And I swear, I hope and pray that we can get there. We can get to a place where we can lift ourselves up from, I'm tired, to no, do something there.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it by knocking on their door. Build your own door.
Like you did Crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now, did you fulfill your vision for Crossroads? Or is it still moving?
At a certain point, I felt I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left.
Okay.
Right? So, in 1999, with you talk about stars. I mean, with Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis had been on our stage, and Anna DeVere Smith, and it just so many amazing people, and Tazaki Shange, and all of these folks. Not to mention, as you say, the historical figures who we brought light to, like Muhammad Ali and Malcolm and Martin and Rosa Parks and you know, all of these people in our history. And then now to expand ourselves to the world, where we were also doing South African works. We had a show on Broadway at the time. That was It Ain't Nothing But the Blues. And it was nominated for 2 Tony Awards. We had shows all over the country playing. We had shows in development. We had just received a Tony Award for the best outstanding theater in America, and I thought, okay, this is a good time to take it. I didn't expect to not come back. What I wanted to do was go for a while to let other people run it and see their dreams come true, and then come back as a consultant to help expand Crossroads to the rest of the world.
Sure.
In terms of international touring, and that's really what my plan was. But it was something I was able to do because I felt there was a level by that time of fulfillment.
So where's Crossroads going now? Well,
in between time, there were a few people keeping it going.
Yeah.
I'd say Marshall Jones, third. Marshall kept it going for over 10 years.
Yeah.
With very little to work with. The closing of Crossroads, before he was there, and when I was in Trinidad, the closing of Crossroads for a matter of a few months to get themselves together and reorganize and just really try to figure out where they wanted to go, was supposed to be a matter of a couple months. It turned into 6 months, and then a year, and then 2 years. And even the third year was just tough for them, trying to keep things going, and they didn't have the theater anymore. I was asked to come back and help, and at the same time, Richard Nurse, who his cousins I met, Gregory Hines and Maurice Hines. Dick Nurse lived here and came and retired out of Rutgers. And he came back. So he and I said, let's give it a few years and get this company back together again. And basically took it from 0 to a little bit above, but enough to keep it going. And then Marshall came in to keep it going, and that was great. And during those years, Crossroads did well, but it never was able to fly because it never had the money to by that time. I came back last year, just before the pandemic. Well, no, when the pandemic hit, because Marshall decided he was leaving. So I said, okay, Marshall. And I thought a lot about it. And I tell you, it was the fact that around that time, Cheryl Wall, our first board president, passed away. This is during COVID times. And then a month later, Lee passed away.
Mm-hmm.
This is all in 2020, and all during COVID. And I thought, okay, somebody's trying to tell me something. My mother was in a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
My father had passed away. And I thought about all these people who did so much in the past. The least I can do is jump in and say, okay, not to come in like I did with Richard Nurse to say, I'll give it a few years, but to say, no, I'm back for good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm back for good, and I'm happy. And there's some new ways we're going to be doing things.
Yeah.
Last year, of course, just like everybody, we were online. But you know, when Crossroads was online last year, we got close to 60,000 viewers, and from all over the world. So I want to keep some of that, which is really great. But I also want to do our seasons differently, because now that we don't have that old theater anymore, our new theater, we're in the Performing Arts Center. Beautiful, look at this. And this is one of the theaters in this space, but there are two. One is larger than this. There are rehearsal halls. There's a gorgeous lobby. There's a mezzanine. And I'm looking at it and I said, boy, the things we can do in here. This is wonderful. But here's the problem, challenge, I should say, which is that all along our identity as a company was based on everything we did in those buildings, in that building. The old sewing factory, the new building here on Livingston Avenue. And now who are we? We're one of the people who are part of the cultural center. There's no Performing Arts Center. There's no Crossroads out front or anything like that. But it is beautiful. And it is state of the art. And it gives us such opportunity for production, achievement in production. So the question is, how do we address identity? And so I developed this plan. Rather than doing one show every other month, which is what we normally do from September to June, why not condense them into 2 festivals where we are running our shows simultaneously and we take over the entire center? So it's Crossroads. Wherever you look, you come in and it's the Crossroads audience, and there's a bookstore, and there's food, and there's our music playing. And you look and you say, it's our people, and our people at Crossroads, as you know, is a mix of people of all backgrounds. And you feel good. You feel good in the lobby, and then at a certain point, some people go to one theater, some people go to another, but it's still Crossroads shows. Some people go upstairs to the rehearsal hall where I want the community to have a role in Crossroads. So for free. I mean, you know, if you were a community group and you're interested in us supporting you by giving you the rehearsal hall for that night, or hey, that week if you want, let's talk. You hear me, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm serious. I'm not just talking about something that you have fun with. I'm talking about, no, if you're serious, or if you're a playwright and you have a play, you know, anything for the community, that's there too. Every single night the other shows are running. Saturday mornings, Chris, for free. Bring your child. And we have what we call free family Saturdays.
Beautiful.
And bringing in world-class artists. I think our first one is what's our first? We have a whole bunch, but Divinity Rocks, for example, was Beyonce's bass player.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So she's now doing her own thing.
Yeah, the Black Girls Rock.
Huh?
She does Black Girls Rock, right?
That's right, exactly. And that will be coming.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of stuff. So when you bring your children, you're not just bringing them to, somebody who plays guitar and that's it. No, these are world-class artists.
Yes.
Because children should be attracted and come into contact with world-class artists in the way my parents did on the Potomac River when I was a kid, and even before I was born. We will just, we'll rock. We'll rock in all spaces of the center for a month.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to do starting at the end of September into October. And then we're going to do it again for another month throughout the month of June. And then, of course, in between, we'll have other things like the Genesis Festival in March and you know, certain things. And we'll be online. So it's really, really about not just doing the same old stuff the same old way. No, this is a festival. These are festivals that you're going to be part of. And you're going to come to this show and you say, you know what, I want to go see that other show too. Well, come tomorrow night and see it. It'll be that kind of thing. But it's ultimately about reconvening community.
So it's almost like a conference.
It's not a conference because a conference is so structured and you're supposed to go learn something. No, you're going to learn, but that's not the reason you're coming. You're coming for the same reason a flag or banner flows in the air. And that's what a festival is. It's because you feel good. You want to come and feel good. You want to have joy. You want to be part of a celebration. That's what it is. All these things happening at the same time.
Beautiful.
But it's going to be safe as well, Chris, because we have to be aware of that. Everybody's got to be vaccinated if you're coming to see a Crossroads show. But if you do, you're going to be seeing, the first show you're going to be seeing is starring Sweet Honey in the Rock. And it's going to be amazing. It's a new piece. It's about the last 15 months that we went through, but in a positive way, to get us to the point where we are willing to come back out into the sun again. It's called When Day Comes. And then the other is called Emergency, and that's a one-man show by Daniel Beatty, who's a spoken word artist.
I know.
Right? So young folks, if you know Def Comedy Jam, you know Daniel Beatty. And he'll be here, and he's doing all of these different characters in a play that is about a slave ship, a ghost slave ship, rising today up in the Hudson River, right? In front of the Statue of Liberty. And you think sometimes, well, what would our ancestors think today that we're going through? All this stuff. That's what this is about. And so much more, you know, so much more. But we'll have all this stuff happening. In June will be Freedom Rider, and then another show called Text Me When You Arrive from South Africa, a women's piece. We're just going to be all over and one at the same time.
So now, if you want to be a part of Crossroads, not just membership, but get involved in some of the artistic things behind the scenes, who would you contact to do that?
That's a good point. Give us a call. Whoever answers the phone is going to help you with that.
Okay.
We do know that there just about everybody involved with Crossroads are professionals and parts of unions. But we always are looking for ways to help promote apprenticeships, internships, and people who just want to volunteer because they want to learn. They want to be involved, whether it's backstage or helping out with the community events, or coming with me to casting in New York sometimes, just to sit in the room. You want to be in the room, we'll find a way.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Rick.
All right, man.
I know that you're going to be really a hectic schedule after this. I'm glad
we're ready.
I was going to do anything. If I had to take steroids to get myself, because I was coming in from Hawaii, I was really jet lagged.
Man.
I made it.
I'm glad you made it.
You know what?
You're a proud father, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
There you go.
My son is truly, trying to carry the baton in his own way. He's not just following my, footsteps. He's making he's pioneering.
Well, that's the best we can ask for from them. Our job is to give them everything they can so that they can then take it from there. That's what John Lewis did.
Yes.
John Lewis did that.
Yeah.
And, the thing why I wanted to do Freedom Rider, which is, he was the most famous freedom rider, was because he was so young. And it's important for young people to know this is your story. This is not your parents and your grandparents' story. This is your story because it shows you what you could do.
Fearlessness.
Fearlessness. And
you had fearlessness.
I had fearlessness.
What were you afraid of? Were you afraid of anything?
No, not at all.
Not
at all.
And you have that in common with all the leaders. Muhammad Ali. I don't think Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of those people that are our role models show that common sense of no fear. No fear. That's right. But I do wear my seatbelt in a car. I did take my vaccine. I may be fearless, but that doesn't mean I'm above science. Right. That's a good way to close. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.
Definitely. Thank you. Community All Unite TV, every Thursday from 8 to 8:30 on channels 1097 and 190. We have had another excellent interview with historian. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you, guys.
And Rick, thanks again. And we will be back with more great shows just like this. And I'm hoping to maybe you could set up something with the actors. Some of these actors when you have certain shows that you want to promote, we could do that. Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to come back.
And we'll also be asking Chris to act.
I would love that. I would love to.
Maybe even sing.
Oh yeah, I would love to do. I'd like to do all that stuff. I'm a ham. But thanks a lot, man. Over and out.
My pleasure.
Community.
It's a fight now.
Right now.
It's a fight now.
Community.
It's a fight now.
Head high. Get ready for the fight now.
It's a fight now.
Eyes wide. It's now.
It's a fight now. It's a fight now.
Just remember and fill your heart with love now. In your truth, you find is the key now. Reach your fear and you will all be free now.